Have you ever felt like you're just drowning in data? You've got spreadsheets with columns that just scroll on forever? Well, today we're talking about a technique that's like a lifeline. It's called Principal Component Analysis, or PCA for short. And it's an incredible tool for finding the simple, clear story that's hiding inside really complex, messy data. So let's just frame this with a question. Imagine you're trying to figure out your customers. You have data with hundreds, maybe thousands of columns, age, location, purchase history, every single click, the whole shebang. You can't just plot that on a 2D graph. It's impossible. So, how do you find the patterns? That's the exact challenge that PCA was designed to solve. All right, so before we jump into the solution, we really need to understand the problem it's trying to solve. And in data science, this problem has a pretty famous and kind of dramatic name, the curse of dimensionality. So what's the big deal with this curse? Well, for starters, it makes your computer move at a snail's pace. Seriously. Machine learning models can run anywhere from 10 to 100 times slower when they have to process too many features. Each extra dimension, each new column, is just more work, and it bogs everything down. But it's not just about speed. When you have too many features, your model can get, confused. It starts to memorize random noise and little quirks in your training data instead of learning the actual, real pattern underneath. We call that overfitting, and it's a huge problem. On top of that, a lot of your features might be telling you the same thing, like having a customer's age and their date of birth. It's just redundant clutter, and it makes seeing the big picture almost impossible. So, how in the world do we fight back against this curse? Well, we need a totally new way to look at our data. We need a better viewpoint. And this, right here, is where PCA comes into the picture. So, what exactly is PCA? At its heart, it's a technique for reducing the number of dimensions in your data. But it's really smart about it. Instead of just blindly deleting columns, it combines them to create a few new, powerful ones. Its main goal is to create these new features that capture the absolute maximum amount of variance, which is just a technical way of saying the important information or the spread in your data. And this is honestly the best way to think about it. Imagine you're trying to take a picture of a complex sculpture. If you stand in the wrong spot, you just get a confusing mess of shapes. But if you walk around and find that one perfect angle, suddenly you have a clear 2D picture that captures the essence of the entire 3D object. PCA is like that expert photographer for your data. It rotates it around in multi-dimensional space to find the most informative shot. Now, we're not going to get bogged down in the heavy math here, but here's the basic game plan. First, PCA gets all our features on the same scale so nothing is unfairly weighted. Then it calculates something called a covariance matrix. Think of it like a cheat sheet that shows how every feature moves in relation to every other feature. From there, it pulls out the principal components. These are our new perfect camera angles. They capture the most information, and this is critical, they are all completely independent of one another. Okay, theory is one thing, but let's actually see how this works in practice. We're going to use a classic example, one that's basically the hello world of data science, the iris flower dataset. So this dataset has measurements for 3 different species of iris flowers. And for each flower, we have 4 different features or dimensions: the sepal length, sepal width, petal length, and petal width. Now, how would you even begin to visualize 4 dimensions at once to see if the species are different? You can't. Our brains just aren't built for it. And here is where the magic happens. After we run PCA on this data, the very first new component it creates, we'll call it PC1, explains a whopping 73% of all the variation in our original 4 columns. Then you add in the second component, PC2, and together, they've captured over 95% of the original information. It's incredible. We've gone from 4 dimensions down to just 2, and we've lost almost nothing important. The result is a complete transformation. When we actually plot these two new components on a simple 2D graph, the three different flower species, which were all jumbled together in that invisible four-dimensional space, suddenly separate into three beautiful, distinct clusters. It's truly like putting on glasses for the very first time and seeing everything clearly. Okay, great. So we have this really neat 2D plot. But what do principal component 1 and principal component 2 actually mean? They're not just random labels. This next step, interpretation, is absolutely crucial. So how do we figure this out? We use this table of what are called loadings. This is basically our decoder ring. These numbers show us the recipe for each new component. How much of each original feature went into creating it. The bigger the number, whether it's positive or negative, the more important that original feature is for that new component. So let's decode PC1 together. If you look at that first column in our table, you see it has high positive scores for petal length and petal width. This tells us that PC1 is essentially a measurement of overall petal size. A flower that scores high on the PC1 axis is quite simply a flower with bigger petals. Now, PC2 is a little more interesting. It's defined by that really strong negative value for sepal width. That means it's capturing a contrast. A high score on the PC2 axis means a flower has a narrow sepal width compared to its other measurements. So while PC1 was all about size, PC2 is really telling us about the flower's shape, specifically the contrast between how wide its sepals are versus its petal dimensions. A key question you might be asking is, why did we stop at 2 components? Why not 3 or 1? Well, the answer often comes from a chart like this, called a scree plot. It shows how much new information each component adds. See that steep drop-off right after the second component? That's called the elbow. It's the point of diminishing returns, and it's a huge clue that PC3 and PC4 probably don't add enough new insight to be worth keeping around. Okay, so let's zoom back out and look at the big picture here. We've walked through the theory, we've gone through a practical example. Why should any of this actually matter to you? The takeaway here is both simple and incredibly powerful. PCA takes your data from the state of high-dimensional chaos and brings it into low-dimensional clarity. It can transform slow, clunky models into fast, efficient ones. And maybe most importantly, it cuts right through the noise of redundant data to reveal the actual key insights that were hidden inside all along. And that really just leaves us with one final thought. PCA isn't just a niche technique for analyzing flower datasets. It's used everywhere, in genetics, in finance, in complex image recognition. It's like a universal translator for complexity. So the only real question left is, what hidden patterns could it reveal in the data